2 years down and the iPhone 16 Pro is upon us. I'm closing the chapter on the iPhone 14 Pro. Here's my closing thoughts on the device that's been my daily driver for the last 2 years. Let's start with the good. I really like the size of the base Pro model. I came from the 13 Pro Max and that phone always felt a little bit big and hard to hold for me. The size of the regular 14 Pro is much better for everyday use, and I can almost get away with using it with one hand when I have a case on it. As always, the build quality on Apple products is superb. I've rarely dropped this, and it has been in a case probably 80% of the time, but the outside perimeter of the device, the metal, the glass, everything is in really good shape considering it's been used for 2 years now. Nothing is broken, the charging port still works fine, and all of the speakers are functioning properly as well, with, of course, no issues on the display. I am also officially putting down the Apple CarPlay cord that's been riding around in my car since 2016. I'm going to estimate that this thing's been used over 2,000 times, and it finally has started to break right by the Lightning port end. And with the advent of USB-C in the upcoming iPhone 16 Pro, I'm going to elect to not replace this and get myself a USB-C cord. But props to Anker. I mean, that's 8 years of use almost every day with this cord, and really great longevity out of this USB-A to Lightning cord from Anker. And the AMOLED screen is really great on the iPhone 14 Pro. Great colors. It's bright enough outdoors. Gets fairly dim. I'd argue I'd want it a little bit dimmer at nighttime, but the screen is really great, despite the fact that I don't use always on display nearly ever, even though it was introduced with this iPhone 14 Pro lineup. On to the just okay, and I'm putting battery life in this, having obviously the smaller form factor Pro device and not the Pro Max does limit your battery life a little bit. I've had very little trouble getting through a full day though. If I am going to use it a little bit more heavily, I will throw it on the charger while I shower after I work out in the afternoon. That'll for sure get me through the rest of the day. And I throw it on the MagSafe charger at night before I go to bed. Things that I disliked about the iPhone 14 Pro. It is a heavy device, especially when you put a case on it. And if you have carpal tunnel issues like I do, holding it for long periods of time with one hand can be annoying. And if you take the case off to make it a little bit lighter and a little bit less bulky, you have the annoying polished stainless steel edges that I've always hated. I like the matte sides of the regular iPhone better. They're easier to grip in my opinion, though they don't look quite as good or as premium, I guess, but that's the trade-off you get with the Pro devices of this generation. The glossy stainless steel sides also collect fingerprints like crazy. You'd be well suited to buy yourself an Apple microfiber cloth to keep this thing freaking clean all the time. Now, one feature that was introduced here that I don't really ever use is ProRes video. I bought the 256 gigabyte iPhone to make sure that I could do ProRes video. At this point in its life, I have a little over 100 gigs used on the phone, so it's constantly freeing up resources in order for me to shoot in ProRes. And at best, I get 14 minutes of record time. That means if I wanted to use my iPhone as an A-roll camera for YouTube, I really wouldn't be able to. I regularly roll for 14, 15, 20 minutes when recording these videos, and it's quite annoying that I have such a short record limit due to the size of the internal hard drive on the phone. That said, the regular 4K video out of the iPhone is really great. It actually matches up well with Sony cameras, and I've used it over the past year plenty of times to shoot B-roll for these videos. Not once has anybody commented on the video saying, "Oh, your B-roll looks like crap, and I can tell you used an iPhone and not a mirrorless camera." On to always on display. Like I said, I don't really use it. I found that my phone's in my pocket more often than not. Sometimes it's in a backpack if I'm at work. And I found that always on display just kind of wasted battery, and I didn't really need the extra distraction of having my phone's display on all the time. I do, however, use always on display on the Apple Watch, so that's my quick glance notification center. If I want to get some information, I've got, the weather, I've got the calendar, and a few other complications on the Apple Watch face that I can quickly glance at if I need some information. Maybe my last overrated feature here is the RAW photos. Now, it's really cool that Apple started to include RAW photos on the iPhone, but you could get professional results with the iPhone well before they included RAW. And these RAW files definitely don't hold up to, obviously, a full frame photography camera like the Sony a7 IV that I'm shooting on now, which has a lot more dynamic range and the files are a lot more flexible when you get them into Lightroom or whatever your editing software is to push the colors around and adjust exposure, so on and so forth. And maybe my most underrated feature on the 14 Pro was the dynamic island. I did kind of think this was a little bit of a gimmick when they introduced it. I was like, when am I going to use that? That's annoying. Why couldn't they just totally get rid of the, pill or the notch? Instead, I have this black thing on my screen now. But the implementation of the dynamic island is kind of an Apple solution after all. It took maybe a poor design choice to have the pill shape still there and turned it into an amazingly useful software feature for space that would otherwise not be utilized. Seeing music that's playing or directions where you're going or any of the other number of complications that you can have show up in the dynamic island, it turns out that I do really like this glanceable feature and often use it. And I did have some FOMO for the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, mainly Apple log footage. When that came out, I really wanted to upgrade for the new camera system, but I couldn't justify the cost this year. And the minor design changes with the titanium and otherwise didn't really make the 15 a strong upgrade choice for me over the 14 Pro anyways. I am, however, happy that I will be able to get my hands on Apple Log with the 16 Pro here in a few weeks and test that out and play with it, even if it comes at the expense of needing a bigger internal storage size so I don't have to fuss around with shooting on external SSDs or an SD card. For years, I would upgrade my phone every year. It was kind of refreshing to keep the same device for 2 years in a row. These smaller iterative changes that Apple has been making recently, including really giving most of the software features of the newer devices and gatekeeping just a few hardware features behind the newest device, means that you can realistically keep your current device for longer. Chances are that even a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old iPhone performs almost just as well as the brand new one without the cost of upgrading. I'm hoping the iPhone 16 Pro can have similar longevity for me of the iPhone 14 Pro. We'll see in a couple weeks. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss anything. And I'll see you in the next one. Later.